Welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. It's Tuesday afternoon. I'm Natasha Meikle and I'm delighted to be joined by Liam and Lawrence. Now, it's been a while since I've been on with you guys on a Tuesday, so I feel like we've got a bit of catching up to do. So I want to hear you guys' thoughts on the last couple of fixtures. I want to look ahead to our first European tie, which is, of course, a week today. We'll talk about a little bit about our international Celts as Scotland take on England tonight at Hampden. And we'll talk about our girls' European campaign, and it's sadly coming to an end at the weekend. Celtic's squad list for Europe has just been announced, so we've got plenty to get through today. But firstly, Liam, Lawrence, how are you both?
Good. Just with reference to the international game, I just want to point out that Celtic's Japanese translator has 3 times the number of medals that the England captain does. Just saying.
That's a great start to kick us off. Great start. But before we get into that and before we get into the rest of today's show, I want to have a wee bit of a recap. Like I said, I've not been on in a while and it's nice to reflect and see where we are and look back over recent results, in particular that all-important Derby win. I know that it's been covered on the show already. The listeners have had the chance to have their say, but I want to catch up with you two, and what I want to know is what it's taught you about the team, what we've learned about the team since I was last on, and how that stands us going forward. I think I remember, Lawrence, the last time I was on here, it was a little bit difficult. We'd had the Cup result, we'd had the St Johnstone result, and I think I was just a little bit concerned about the fact that it wasn't clicking. For me, there was a little bit of apprehension going into the Ibrox tie, and I think that game taught me a lot about the mentality of the team, and it taught me a lot about Rodgers' ability as a manager. It certainly reminded me of how good he tactically is in these big games, which I think he got spot on in the last tie that we had. Lawrence, what have you learned about the team since we last spoke, both in terms of the team as a whole and maybe individually as well?
I think the main thing from that game is, and it's not just us that's got the realisation, but it's probably why there was such a big fallout and rumours of sacking. As you realise, Brendan's actually back, and when he's in charge, they lose. And he's promised he's going to be here for 3 years, so they're looking at 3 years of losing, which I know they're not that old a club, and they're obviously used to losing throughout their history, but it looks like it's going to continue, which is great news for us as Celtic fans. Liam Scales, he performed a lot better than I thought he would. Still, Champions League on the horizon. We're still worried about left back and goalkeeper, but Joe Hart had a fine game. Dyson was great. Would you say the team's really clicked into top gear yet? Probably not, but then again, we didn't need to beat them.
Yeah, I think, Liam, that is one thing that I was probably surprised about the most. And if I look back to the last broadcast we did together to this one, the performance of Liam Scales is one thing that I maybe didn't expect to be commenting on so positively. Last time, I think in most quarters, Liam wasn't really going to be considered as a legitimate option going forward. And while I'm not suggesting that one game and one good performance changes anything significantly, I do think he's proving himself as probably quite an able deputy, at least domestically. I was really impressed with him at Ibrox, and I think that'll stand him in very good stead going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never been more delighted to be proven completely wrong about a Celtic player. I said he wasn't Celtic class, but he showed the character and the determination when we needed it most. And whatever happens of his Celtic career from here on out, he can be very proud of what he did at Ibrox. And I think last time we were on, if I remember correctly, I did say I was apprehensive getting into that game. Everything was in their favour. The crowd, the form, the availability of the squad depth, etc. Everything was in Rangers' favour, and we still beat them. And what a mental blow that is to them. And you can tell from the absolute hysteria amongst their support that that's exactly what it is. And it's, I said I wasn't sure going into the game, but I said, but if we could win this, what what an almighty mental step forward it is for us. And it is the perfect springboard to kickstart the rest of the season. If we can just go on a run now and win our next 8 or 9 games, which I don't think Rangers will, we could get to Christmas, and by the next time we play them, we could be 10 points clear.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think as important as 3 points it was, I think, Lawrence, what it has done in terms of the feeling around the club, I think what it's done in terms of the momentum is almost as important as those 3 points themselves, because I think people went into that game just as Liam did, just as I did, a little bit concerned, a little bit worried about the way we were performing, a little bit worried about the start to the season. And I think, albeit it is one result in 3 points, I think what that's done for fans' confidence, fans' belief that we will get better as the season goes on. We did just need a little bit of time at the start. It is just going to need time to start clicking. I think giving fans that belief and reassurance with that result at Ibrox is equally as important as the 3 points, and the momentum and confidence it gives the players as well, I think will be invaluable, Lawrence, in the games to come.
Yeah, but we couldn't have afforded 3 bad games in a row. Let's be honest, the 2 performances before that weren't stellar performances. As Liam's touched on, we played the defence that we could play because of injury. They've never had a better chance to take points. They've got the world beaters in from all over. They've spent 15 million quid, probably most of they don't have, to sign footballing giants like Lammers and Dessers, and they weren't good enough to beat our thrown together defence. I think their forwards, I'm not too sure, because apparently in their playing records they don't score a lot of goals, but it could be a tactical genius move to sign non-scoring forwards. Who knows?
I'm not sure that will prove to be the case. I want to talk about the games coming up. Obviously Dundee is first, but as our tagline says, it is 1 week until the Champions League opener. A week today is our first Champions League tie away to Feyenoord. A game I'm really excited about. I am heading over to Rotterdam for the game, heading over on Monday afternoon for the game on Tuesday evening. So, I personally can't wait for these European ties to come back round, as much as I'm very happy that we don't have to do the qualifying route by winning the league. You do miss the European football, so I'm very excited to get back to it. And sitting there watching the Champions League draw is so exciting. Especially for some of the fans who are going to travel away to these games. Not only are you finding out the teams that will be taking on in this prestigious competition, you're finding out that added excitement of where the trips will be, what stadiums you're going to see, which cities you're going to visit. So I'm pretty excited about the way that the draw shaped up in that result. But first up is Rotterdam for Feyenoord. Now, Liam, I'm reading that they have a bit of an injury crisis on their hands, if you're to believe the Daily Record, and that's a topic for another day. But I don't think we'll let that media chat let us get in any way complacent. What they're reporting is that their frontman, Ueda, seems to have picked up an injury while on international duty with Japan. I'm sure you can probably tell us a bit more about that. But I think that leaves them with a bit of lack of attacking options. Their first choice, Jimenez, is suspended for the first 2 group stage games. Their goalkeeper's missing out through breaking his wrist. One of their defenders missed the Dutch national game against Ireland on Sunday through injury. So they do seem to have a bit of an injury problem. But in saying that, they're still a very strong side. We can't possibly underestimate them, especially away from home. But what can you tell us about what you know about their forward injury situation?
Well, Japan are actually playing a match which I'm going to watch directly after this game, directly after this show, rather, against Turkey in the Kirin Cup tonight. And I'm assuming that he's going to play no part in that. And probably that means that Dyson and or Kyogo is going to get the nod, which worries me because Turkey are quite a physical team and they're going to get stuck in. And I just hope that, we were talking about, it's great, one of their best players has got injured. 2 of our best players have still got a match to get through tonight. So let's just be careful what we wish for there, And also, I think that you know, the Daily Record were making similar noises about us before we went to Ibrox, and look how that turned out. So I don't read too much into injury crises, especially in Europe, because in Europe you come up against teams that have that squad depth.
Mhm.
And so the squad depth is going to be such that whoever you face is going to be quality. But I'm optimistic. I think we could definitely get a draw over there, and that could be the perfect springboard for the rest of the European campaign if we can.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that is something that we shouldn't be writing off. I don't think, despite the fact that they've come out pot one, means that, you know, away from home, it's a game that we can't win, that we can't take points from. You know, where a club like Celtic should be going into most games thinking that they can impose themselves. And I remember something that Ange Postecoglou always used to say is that he never went into a game thinking that he couldn't win it. He talked about taking Australia to the World Cup and said, of course, he went into that thinking that he could potentially win it. Because what was the point in being there if you don't think that you're going to win it? So I like that mentality. I think it's a very winning mentality, and one that I think that we should be taking over to Feyenoord. Lawrence, as much as we've talked about their injury problems and the potential problems they have in terms of strike force, we still have injury problems of our own that can't be ignored, particularly defensively. So, you know, as much as we can look at their attacking options being somewhat limited, our defensive options are also somewhat limited.
Yeah, listen, Brendan's team on the road in Europe, I think he knows he's back, and that's where he's got to make progress in, isn't it? Yeah, but we're limited defensively. See, Carter Vickers is in the squad, which is good news. I think, you know, how close are we? I don't think he'll play against Feyenoord. I think we're probably the same defence as went against Ibrox, unless we include the Liverpool loanee and push him in. So, you know, if it didn't fill you with dread at Ibrox, you know, what might have happened, certainly I'd say Feyenoord are going to prove a tougher nut to crack away from home than, you know, Rangers are proven at Ibrox. So, yeah, I think the defence is in for a bit of a tough test, whether they've got the first choice strikers are not fit. But yeah, Angie's idea that we plan to win. I'm sure Brendan will have a plan to win that game. If Kyogo's fit, you know, we've got a cracking goal scorer, as Liam predicted almost 2 years ago, the best striker since Larson. So yeah, you know, we've got a lot to offer going forward. You just got to kind of keep it tight at the back, haven't we? And hope that these guys can pull off, you know, another clean sheet for us.
Talking about the players that we will have available and won't have available, the Celtic Champions League squad has been announced this morning, just before we came on air. And as well as the expected inclusions and omissions, I thought I would read out some of the ones who were probably on the line. So in terms of players in and who have made the cut, Liam Scales has, Nat Phillips has, Tomokki has, Bernardo has, and Johnston has. Whereas the players who have not made the cut are Segrist, Narochki, Kobayashi, Bernabe, Kwon, McCarthy, and Tilio. Liam, any surprises in there for you?
I mean, I don't want to be disrespectful, but Johnson's in there for the quota, isn't he? Really? Is it Mikey Johnson you're talking about, or Alistair Johnson? Sorry.
Let me pull my list back up and confirm that one for you. It's not Mikey Johnston, it is Alistair Johnson.
Right, okay, then I'm talking nonsense. Ignore what I just said. No,
Alistair recovered from injury enough to make.
Yeah. But we do. I think Kwon and Tilio. I mean, Tilio's injury notwithstanding, they're both players that we're looking at development, you know, squad players for a bit further down the line. You don't want to chuck players straight into the Champions League when they've just come from Australia and Korea. They need some time to adapt. You know, a bit of a criticism of Ange's first Champions League campaign was that we did, you know, some of our players who had come from further afield, there was a feeling they kind of got found out at that level because they weren't ready. So I don't see anything wrong with taking our time and maybe not pitching our international players straight into it. No, I think it's a good squad. I think it's a strong squad. I am glad that the like you say, the players who are borderline are in. I'm optimistic. We'll see how we go, but I'm optimistic.
One thing that I'm seeing in the comments coming through that people are expressing a little bit of surprise at, Lawrence, is the fact that there's only 2 goalkeepers in that squad, Joe Hart and Scott Bain. Relatively surprising to see that, Lawrence. Normally in a team like this, you'd see 3.
Well, I think traditionally we've always had 3, but Brendan's went, have we ever needed 3? Now we've said that, but and he's thinking, look, it'll give me a few more options. So he's maybe just looked at it and went, when have we ever needed 3 keepers in a Champions League group stage? And if the answer's never, he's like, many have been in, right? It's probably more prudent to get maybe Carter Vickers included, who's probably not going to play against Feyenoord, but could take part in the later group stages. So maybe he's looking at things like that. Look, I'll put someone that's coming back from injury in, and he'll sacrifice a keeper for it.
Mm-hmm. I think some of the more surprising ones for me, Liam, and Stephen Donnelly's agreeing in the chat. This is one that I was going to bring up. And thank you for commenting, Stephen. If anyone else wants to give us their views on the squad, who's made it, who hasn't, please pop them in the chat and we'll have a look at what you're thinking as well as what we're thinking. But what I'm thinking is in line with Stephen Donnelly. His comment is on the screen right now. He says he's surprised Narodski is not included. Liam, I think I'm probably surprised at that one too. We've recently brought him in, surely with the intention of going forward and being one of, our first, if not backup, centre halves. Has the arrival of Nat Phillips perhaps changed his position in the squad?
The thing is, though, even with Phillips coming in, I would still, based on the very little that we've seen of them, I would still have Nawrocki over Lagerbielke if it was a choice between the two. But we don't know the extent of his injury, and maybe Brendan thinks that it's someone who might not come back quick enough to play enough of a part to justify his inclusion. So, as the commenter's just saying there, he might be out. His injury might be a wee bit longer than we might hope. So, if he's not going to be back until late October, early November, he's already missed half the campaign. So, there's probably not much point bringing him in at that point.
Yeah, the commentators are coming in and agreeing with that one, Lawrence. I think that's likely to be the case, is that perhaps, as Michael is saying in the comments, we're expecting Nawrocki to be out longer than at first thought.
How many centre-halves do we need, though? In the Champions League squad. Phillips is in and he's fit. We don't think Carter Vickers is fit. Welsh counts as club trained. So maybe you're looking to go, right, we're heavy in centre-halves just now. Not fit centre-halves, but as a whole. It could be worse, or it could just be said, well, look, I've put Carter Vickers in. He's not going to play all the group games. I don't need another centre-half who's also injured that's not going to play all the group games. That doesn't count as club trained or league trained. It would be, I think he's got enough centre halves in the squad. Yeah,
a bit of an empty space. The one thing that concerns me about going into this campaign is still defensively. I think we have strong potential going forward. I think our forward play can be very good, but the difference in Europe is the quality of the opposition, Liam, in terms of how ruthless they can be in attack. A defensive error domestically does not always result in conceding a goal. In Europe, you absolutely will get punished, and our back line will be tested more than ever. And unfortunately, that still, I think, is where we are a little light as a result of some of the injuries that we've seen. Having Alistair Johnson back is great. Hopefully, he'll be fit after coming off in our last game and ready to go. But I do still think we're a little weak in the left back position. Bernaby hasn't even made the squad. We're relying solely on Greg Taylor in Europe, and of course the loss of the experience of Carter Vickers I think is still massive. It's going to be a huge ask for Lagerbielke to step up, and I think that going into these ties I am still a little bit concerned about being a little bit light at the back, Liam.
Absolutely. As great as the victory at Ibrox was, we have to kind of keep our feet on the ground here. Aye, we went there and we won, and that's a great result. But I don't think it's much of a barometer for what we're going to do in Europe because, one, I don't think Rangers are that great a team. Two, if you look back on the match, our best players on the day were, in my opinion, our centre-half, our goalkeeper, and Daizen Maeda, largely for his defensive display rather than his attacking display. So, it was all, it was a great result, but it was at sometimes a kind of a backs to the wall performance. And, we need to keep that sort of reality check there and say, well, aye, okay, beating your nearest rivals is a great springboard to go into Europe. But, we beat a team that are not that great. And Feyenoord is going to be a much, much harder challenge. And we need to have realistic expectations for this. That's why I think at best we'll get a draw. I don't see us going there and winning because I don't think we're quite there yet. And like you say, the defence is a concern. But who knows? With Celtic, anything is possible.
It certainly is. What's something that the comments are coming in on is saying that they don't see Liam Scales in the squad. My only comment on that is that you are looking at the Daily Records squad list. And if you're using that as your source of accurate information, I would change your source of accurate information. The UEFA website has the squad list. Liam Scales is in the squad and Narochki is not in the squad, contrary to the list that you might see on some mainstream media outlets. Lawrence, that brings a point up that's coming through in the comments. Are we solely relying on Taylor at left back, or do you think the intention is that Liam Scales is a deputy at left back?
I think he's a definite deputy, but Taylor's your starter, isn't he? But we've got to realise, there's a chance Taylor could get injured. So who steps in? And it's Liam Scales. So decent enough season at Aberdeen at centre half. He came back in at Ibrox centre half as one of our better players. But it's something I think we've all surprised that Celtic hadn't sorted out during the transfer window, bringing in a challenger for Greg Taylor. But here we are, millions in the bank, and we're still where we were in June in terms of left backs.
Mm-hmm. No, it is a concern, and one thing that we can come on to talk about, which has been mentioned in the comments, is whether we are in a stronger position for this year's Champions League campaign or a weaker position in terms of the squad. But I want to bring up this comment from Ewan Boy Martin, who says he's well interested to see how Brendan Rodgers sets up in Rotterdam. He thinks we'll be solid at the back and use our pace up front, and that's sounds good to me. I'd like to see that. I think for me, if we'd been going into it unchanged from last year or relatively unchanged from last year, I think I would have a little bit more confidence. As successful as Ange was throughout his time here, he was an excellent manager. He played some really great football. One thing that he didn't fulfil his potential in and didn't fulfil the squad's potential in was in Europe. And I think frustratingly, if we'd stayed together as a unit with Postecoglou in charge, continuing the same brand of football, everyone very sure of their positions, what they're meant to be doing, I think I'd felt a lot more confident going into this game a week tonight, and indeed the campaign as a whole. I think the third year of a project, we could really have hit the ground running, really have made a strong impact in this group. And I think the progress has been halted a little bit prematurely by Ange's departure. And it feels like we've taken a slight step back in terms of a reset. I think it will click. I think it's clear that it's coming together. I don't think it's quite there yet. A week today until the first Champions League game feels quite soon for me. But like the comment coming in from Ewan says, I'm interested to see how Rodgers sets up. I think if it had been Postecoglou, I think we would know exactly what we were going to see, because he wouldn't have changed his game plan. His plan B was do plan A better. We were told that from the beginning. With Rodgers, Liam, I think we might maybe a bit likely to see something a bit different from him in Europe than we might see domestically.
Something that Brendan Rodgers has over Ange Postecoglou, I think, is the ability to win ugly. again, we saw that in the last game. Not the prettiest performance, but we got the result. And I think that in Europe, that's going to be especially important. There's no point going out there and playing spectacular, free-flowing, attacking football if you get gubbed 5-0, So I think that we maybe were a wee bit naive last year and lacked a bit of that pragmatism. And I think that Brendan will bring that with having having been down this course before. He'll be a wee bit more savvy about what to do in that regard. It's no slight on Ange, but any manager going into their first Champions League is going to get a bit of a baptism of fire, And maybe we did set the bar a wee bit too high last season in that regard. But this year, we have an easier group than we did last year. Still 3 very good teams, but, eminently beatable. I think all 3 of them on their day are beatable, especially at Celtic Park. And yeah, we'll just have to see what happens. I do agree with you, Natasha. I think it might be a wee bit too soon for this squad. What I'm hoping is if we can get 3rd place by the end of the year, things will click, and then we can have a serious tilt going into the later stages of the Europa.
I think that's right. I do. And I agree with you. I don't think that it is as difficult a group as last season. We're in the Champions League. Every team that we are going to play is a top league. They're in the group stage. They're a top team. They're in the group stages of the Champions League for a reason. There's no easy draw here. But one thing, Lawrence, I considered when the draw was made was that maybe it was going to be better to get a really strong pot 1 team, a team that is going to get maximum points, let them get the maximum points from all of their games, and leave more of a battle for the 2nd and 3rd place spots. What I'm slightly concerned about is that Feyenoord are a very top team, but they are not one of the top teams from pot 1. They're not the strongest in that pot, and I think that some of the other teams in our group, ourselves included, fancy a shot at them, fancy taking points off them. So I think what we might see in this group, Lawrence, is other teams taking points off that pot 1 team, and then there being a more even split across the group in terms of where those points are, which in turn can actually make it slightly more difficult to get out of a group like that. Of course, all speculation. That's what we're here for. We like to talk about it. Lawrence, any concerns about that from your side?
Well, first of all, with the no easy draws in the Champions League, I think Liverpool last season might disagree with you. But for us in Feyenoord, I'd be a lot happier if everyone was fit. If Carter Vickers is fit, you're a lot happier, aren't you? You've got a top pairing at centre half then. But other teams might take points off them, but we can only really worry about what we do. It's up to us to take points. And Brendan will be telling me that. You take points in day 1. It's probably any point away from home's a bonus. When the game's at Celtic Park, and anything away from home is a bonus. So take points off Feyenoord in the first game would be ideal. They're the pot 1 team. If we're the first team to take points off them, it makes them a wee bit more desperate for points. So it maybe gives them the wake-up call against the other teams. So we may be fortunate in that way. We've got enough going forward that you'd expect us to score. Mm-hmm. It's keeping it tight at the back, isn't it? Rod's style of football, retaining the ball. So we should limit the amount of chances they get. It's just... I think team they might not need a lot.
I think the key is, like you say, going to keep it tight at the back defensively. There's the list there: Johnson, Taylor, Lagerbielke, Scales, Phillips, CCV, Ralston, and Welsh. Lawrence. Going into a Champions League campaign a week today, did you expect a stronger defensive list than the one we see there?
So let's go. Johnston is back fit, brilliant. Taylor, happy days. He's proven an able defender. Whereas, we've all said it. He needs competition for that position. Lagerbielke, a bit unknown. I think he's looked okay. Scales, beginning of the season, we've all said could do with an upgrade. Phillips, he's a Liverpool reserve. You've seen his YouTube reel. He looks all right, but he's a bit unknown. Carter Vickers injured. Tony Ralston. He's been here forever and keeps proving everyone wrong. So hopefully he does it again. And Stephen Welsh injured. So I suppose, we've got 6 out of 8 fit defenders when you look at it that way. A couple of them fairly unknown to us, which gives us 4 known defenders for kicking off the Champions League. Yeah, they're definitely expected us to be in a better position than that. I think anyone would. Brendan wouldn't have chosen that as his starting position, would he? 4 known defenders.
And I think that is going to be the most tested. It is where the position we find ourselves in now, but for me, that is where we're going to be the most tested. Liam, we talked about it. The attacking form is much more ruthless in the Champions League than it is domestically. These guys are up for a tough test. Here's where I think that we actually are pretty strong, and that's across the middle. I think we're strong in the middle of the park. In the midfield list that we have is Hatate, Holm, Iwata, Bernardo, O'Reilly, McGregor, and Turnbull. And I think, Liam, that's quite strong. I think we're strong in the middle.
I'm glad to see Iwata in there, because there have been concerns about, does Rodgers not fancy him as a player or whatever? So the fact that he's part of that setup, whereas other, the likes of Kwon are not, I think that's a positive sign for Iwata. Don't know how much of a part he'll ultimately play in the games, but it's good that he's there. And also Hatate, it shows the manager is confident that he will be back at his best sooner rather than later. David Turnbull's in there on merit based on the way he started the season. Holm, I like what I've seen so far. Bernardo, unknown quantity. O'Reilly and McGregor, well, you know what you're getting with those two, and it's always top class. So, I think the midfield is, it's pretty strong.
Going forward again, let's look at the wingers. Again, some new entities for us to consider in here, because we've got Palma, Abada, Yang, Forrest, Maeda, and Liam, there is Mikey Johnston in there as well. Don't always believe the list that you see in the mainstream media. So there's the wingers: Palma, Abada, Yang, Forrest, Maeda, and Mikey Johnston. Lawrence, again, I think if I'm looking at it, I think that we are weaker than we were last year, only in the sense that I think Jota is a huge miss in the Champions League. I think those were the games that he could really come alive in. I think he had some of his better games in the Champions League. We remember that goal in Madrid for one. But again, some more unknown entities. We've not seen Palma. We don't know, see what he can do. Unfortunately, Tilio's missed out because he's still not going to be fully fit. But in terms of the options on the wing, Lawrence, how does that stack up, do you think, going into the Champions League?
I think it's a disappointing start up. Much like defence, we're probably ill prepared. You'd have thought Abada and Maeda would definitely be guys that would be vying for a start this year. Forrest, experienced campaigner. Yang's looked okay. What we've seen, Palma on very late, we're not really seeing anything off. And Mikey Johnston, he's in there just to make up the numbers. Who knows? He did an okay loan spell out, but I think everyone, if you'd to ask people to put money on in June, would Mikey Johnston make the Celtic Champions League squad when we were sitting with 100 million in the bank?
Yeah,
I think the answer would have been no. There's something far wrong the way this transfer windows went. I think, and some of it's down to injuries. Some players coming in so late, but it's got that familiar feel with Champions League, isn't it? You go, it's here before we're ready, and it's like Christmas. You know when it's going to kick off. If somebody says, "Oh, it's Christmas Day," I didn't realise I didn't get time to get your present. You're kind of going, "What's 25th of December?" We know when that is. You should be prepared, and it looks like Celtic have hit the Champions League ill prepared again.
They didn't get us the new present of our Jota replacement, have they, Liam? And I think fans are expecting that. I'm not sure that we got as much money in the bank for Jota as we might have expected when you look at the figures involved in the deal. I don't know if Celtic's cut of that was quite what we expected it to be, but there is no Jota replacement present there, is there? And we knew when this was coming.
I think in the fullness of time, Yang could be the replacement. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think Yang is potentially as good as Jota. We'll have to wait and see. He's still young, new to European football, but I think he's got all the ability, but more importantly, he's got that kind of arrogance is the wrong word, but that callousness, I think I would say. He's not afraid to take on a man. And I think that's something you really need, especially in Europe. You need to have the guile to step up and show what you can do. And I think he's, at least mentally, he's ready to do that. Palma is one that we know nothing about, really. Maeda, you know what you're getting. Forrest, you know what you're getting. And Abada, I think you also know what you're going to get there. The important thing is, particularly for games away from home, guys like Maeda and Abada are going to be absolutely crucial in a defensive sense as an outball. I first noticed Maeda when he was playing for Matsumoto Yamaga here a few years ago, and primarily they ended up getting relegated that season. Every game was backs to the wall, and he was the outball. He just ran across the front line like a madman, just keeping the ball up, trying to create something, and he did it really, really well. And that was what ultimately got him his move to Yokohama. And I think that, that's the type of play that we're going to need in Europe when, we're away at Atletico Madrid, for example. I think we're going to need a bit of an outball, and I think Abada and Maeda can both provide that. And then you've got Yang, who maybe not as fast as those two, but he's got the trickery, which could maybe win as a free kick higher up the pitch, take a bit of pressure off, might even get as a penalty somewhere because it's not Scottish referees we're dealing with. So
you never know. Breaking news coming in from Japan is that Kyogo is in the starting lineup for Japan. Turkey Moriyasu has made dramatic changes from the team that faced Germany. Kei Matsu tells us from YouTube. Thank you for the update. Firstly, I hope he comes through that game injury-free. Liam, you obviously can talk a bit to this. Tell us what we expect from that game.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, it's the Kirin Cup, so there is a trophy up for it, but it is basically a glorified friendly. And when I saw that Maeda and Kyogo were both not featuring against Germany the other night, injuries, regardless of injuries, I thought, right, they're both going to play some part on Tuesday, because that's just how Moriyasu does it with these games. If you remember back in June, Kyogo was on the bench for the first friendly against, I think it was Peru, and then he came on and played in the second friendly against, I think it was El Salvador. So Moriyasu likes to do that. He likes to kind of when he's got friendly matches. He wants to have a full look at the full squad that's available to him. So he rotates almost every position if he can. So I think Kyogo might only play a half today, because I think he may well get swapped out for Maeda at halftime, because Maeda primarily plays through the middle for Japan. So I think that's where we'll see him.
Well, from our point of view, I think we want them both just to come through that game injury-free. So yep. Liam, you'll be watching that game and sending us some updates on that as well. And let's hope that they come through that with no injuries. Of course, we have been talking a lot about the Champions League game, the first tie being 1 week today. But we do have a game before then. Before that, we have Dundee on Saturday. Mantis comes in on YouTube saying, if Phillips, Bernardo, Palma don't play against Dundee, I can't see them starting in Rotterdam. Would be a huge ask to make your debut away in the Champions League. And it does lead on to the question of what we should expect to see from the side that Rodgers puts out on Saturday. For me, I don't see him having one eye on the Rotterdam game in Rotterdam too much. I think at this stage in the league campaign, with it being so early, we need to remain at full strength. We need to ensure the points are on the board, particularly with the St Johnstone slip up in mind. We don't want to afford that again, more from a momentum perspective than a points perspective at this stage of the season. But in saying that, I think it'll be a good opportunity to give some players some minutes under their belt who have maybe not had as many as they might have liked at the start of the season, particularly defensively. If Nat Phillips is now fit, he needs minutes. He needs to see how he's going to fit into that back line. Needs some time to, bond with his fellow defensive partners. Of course, they'll have been training together, but you can't quite replicate that match situation. Again, Alistair Johnston, he came off with a slight knock. Taylor had a slight knock. could be great to get some of these guys some minutes under their belt too. Abada, there's rumours of him having picked up a slight knock. Will we see him play? Lawrence, is that going to be a bit of a conundrum for Brendan on Saturday? There's the balance of we want to get minutes in these players' legs, and also the balance of want them fresh for next week and don't want to pick up any more injuries.
Oh, totally. I guess that's why he's getting 100 grand a week to get this balance right. He's Celtic manager. He's expected to put a winning team on the park week in, week out, and put a team that does it with a bit of style. But not at the best start to the season. Still top of the league though. Horrendous injury crisis, but those players are going to need minutes, especially in defence, because we're going to be relying on that more in Rotterdam than we will on Saturday, hopefully. But you'd still want it to be tested a bit, the guys to be getting some competitive minutes together. So I think we'd probably see Phillips start, and it would start with the defence that's going to face Rotterdam. Midfield and forward, we know a wee bit more about our players than we should have enough. But so I don't think he needs to look to the starting line in Rotterdam to pick his midfield and forwards for the weekend. But defensively, I think he does. I think he needs to pick the defence he's going to start against Feyenoord.
I think that's right, Liam, and I think it will be very telling who we see starting. For me, I expect to see Alistair Johnston, I expect to see Lagerberg, I expect to see Phillips, and I expect to see Taylor. If they're all fit and able to play, is that the same back four that you would start with?
Yeah, pretty much. I think that in an ideal scenario, you start with more or less the team you want to start with against Feyenoord, and hopefully we're a couple of goals up by half time, and then you can rotate out, the five of the players, whoever's looking a bit leggy or whoever has maybe picked up a knock or whatever, just swap them out in the second half and just see the game out. League it's another league game, but these games take on an extra sort of a mental edge when they come off the back of a derby win. Historically, there's been a few times where we've went out and gubbed Rangers and then we've slipped up the next week and it's pretty much nullified what we did in that game. So we need to be careful of that. There is a historical precedent there which we need to be aware of.
Going forward, Lawrence, like you touched on, do you expect to see more changes put in for the Dundee game? I think for me, it'll be very telling who starts in the wider positions. And there has been the suggestion that Abada has picked up a bit of a knock. The club have obviously remained silent of it. The story seems to have sort of dropped. Could be a rumour, could be a little bit fact in it. But it'll be interesting to see if he starts against Dundee, won't it?
Yeah. He's got any sign of injury, you think they'd rest him, but you'd be happy with Maeda and Yang. It's decent white players there, isn't it? I'd be shocked if it was Mikey Johnston. If he came into the picture, I'd really be wondering what was going on. But yeah, Maeda and Yang, you think they would have enough. If Abad is carrying any type of injury, give him a wee bit longer to recover from it. But yeah, I think middle to front, we've got enough. We should have enough in reserve to take Dundee, surely.
And trusting that everyone comes through tonight's games or this afternoon for the Japan game injury-free, I'd expect to see Kyogo play up front. A player who's got another game even before them, of course, is Callum McGregor. We expect to see him feature tonight, of course, as Scotland take on England at Hampden. A good occasion for those Tartan Army fans out there. A good occasion for Scotland playing England, and potentially a very good occasion for Scotland if other results go correctly, meaning that they qualify tonight despite the game against England being a friendly. Lawrence, I know the priority for you might be Callum McGregor coming through that game safely.
Yeah, that's it. That's all we want, isn't it? Callum to come through safely. Yeah, no injuries this evening or today to any Celtic players between now when we play Feyenoord. You just want Callum to come through safely. A win's all well and good for Scotland. Clark's got them playing some great stuff. doesn't get us any points in the league or the Champions League for that matter. So yeah.
It doesn't, but good experience for the Celtic players featuring that squad. Bad Dancer comes in saying hopefully results in our qualifiers go our way tonight, meaning that Scotland would qualify. What an occasion that would be. So I want to move on to talk about something else. Something that I did at the weekend was go and see the Celtic Story. A fantastic show. I'd encourage anyone who hasn't been to go along, experience it. It is a really great reminder of the history of the club, the success that the club has had. And it does make you wonder whether we will see the likes of it again. I'm certainly not talking about the potential of winning a Champions League. I think, unfortunately, those days are probably long gone with the finances involved and the top teams now being in the stratosphere. And I think we're only likely to see that gap get bigger with the possibility of Saudi influence. But I'm sure we could have a whole show on that itself. But of course, there are more European competitions now. There's the Europa League, there's the Conference. There's no reason why, Liam, we couldn't go on and have another good run in the Europa League and emulate some of that great success that the Celtic Story told us all about over the weekend.
Yeah, obviously being where I am, I've not been able to see the Celtic Story this time around, but I did.
A little bit far to travel, I'll give you that
one. The taxi fare is a wee bit excessive, but I did have the good fortune of seeing it back in 1998 when it was headlined by the late great Jimmy Logan, and I saw it again in the early 2000s when the main cast member was Annie Ross, Jimmy Logan's younger sister, if I remember correctly. Really fantastic show then. I mean, I don't know how much of it has been changed now or updated, whatever, but it was a fantastic show. First time I was there, they brought out Bobby Murdoch as the guest of honor at the end, so it was great to see him back in 1998. And the second time around, I don't actually remember who it was the second time around, to be honest. But it was a fantastic night, a great show, really a really positive story, not just about Celtic, but about the history of the west of Scotland, particularly the Irish diaspora in the west of Scotland. You know, I wish that there was some way to get like a Japanese subtitles on the Blu-ray of the old version, because I would love to show it to my wife as a sort of a history, not just of Celtic, but of Glasgow. I think it's a great story.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, and it is a nice reminder and nice to see it played out in front of you, the history of the club, the history that we all know, but seeing it in that format and that show put on by a wonderful cast who are all very talented, it is a great way, Lawrence, to remind yourself of the history of the club.
Yeah, a great celebration of, I suppose, the Irish diaspora as well. The talents within that produce shows like that. It's outstanding, and the very emotional shows to go and see. I think there's a wealth of plays out there about Celtic. Jim Orr's got a couple, hasn't he? It's just brilliant. It's another strand that makes us more than just a club.
Absolutely, it is. And Liam mentioned whether it had been updated since the original version, and it has brilliantly. They've covered the more recent years since the show originally went out. But one update I particularly liked was they had a scene with Patsy Gallagher, and the narrator told him that one day his great-grandchild would go on and play for Celtic in 2023, scoring goals for the club. And the actor playing Patsy Gallagher said, "Brilliant, what's his name?" And he said, which is a fantastic update as we see Amy Gallagher scoring the goals for Celtic women now this season. And I love that, and it brings me on nicely to talk about the women's team and their European exploits. I know you're both big supporters of the women's team, but as a recap for those in the comments who might not have been aware, the women's team went into the first round of Champions League qualifying as a result of finishing second in the league last season. And the first qualifying round is like a mini tournament. There's 4 teams. The 2 teams play, they're split in half. 2 teams play each other in a sort of semi-final. with the 2 winners going on to play a final to get to the next round. We won the first match against Brøndby, our first Women's Champions League win, with a goal from Kelly Clark, our captain, which all felt very apt, as that will go down in history as a result, setting up a final against Vålerenga on Saturday night. It was an even game. I think particularly in the second half, the girls were really on top. They were showing their quality. They were retaining the ball well. They weren't conceding too many chances. Goalkeeper Kelsey Docherty, our new goalkeeper, wasn't tested too much, but was really top when she was tested. Girls scored late on to make it 2-1, but deep into injury time conceded a penalty, meaning in normal time finished 2-2, extra time and penalties. Every single penalty was scored until we reached 11-10. The Celtic goalkeeper stepped up to take her penalty and it was saved. A really, really cruel way to exit the competition, 11-10 on penalties. But I'm sure it'll be a massive learning curve for the girls. They played some really good football, which I think will stand them in good stead going into the league campaign. And they'll be looking to bounce back with the win against Hearts tomorrow evening. Lawrence, like I said, I know that you're a big supporter of the women's team. They played well on Saturday night, didn't they? It was such a disappointing way to go out.
Yeah, totally. Listen, I think the performing way above the level of investment Celtic's putting into them. You know, Fran keeps picking gems, you know, kit up front. You know, I know she signed late last season, but you know, and amongst the goals again, great. Shea Mengu out in the wing. I don't think she'll be with us for long, will she? You know, you can see her moving. And it's heartbreaking, you know, to see that happen to them. You know, I remember Anton Rogan snailed us saving his penalty, and I think that was 9-8 though, wasn't it? It was just before the keepers were going to take. So it's got to be absolutely gutting for them when we're so close. And that's you know, the end of last season when the girls played, and you know, it was almost the last kick they lost the league on. You know, it's showing something for them that they come back from that, and hopefully that same thing they can demonstrate against Hearts. You know, coming back from Champions League disappointment, but you know, they're out there, they're doing us proud. I don't know if Celtic are going to move ahead with the stadium at Barrowfield so as they can hold, you know, more games near Celtic Park. Hopefully, they definitely hold more in Celtic Park, you know, surface 11. But it's something you want to see Celtic develop more, wouldn't you?
It is, absolutely, and the support is there. If you saw the games, you'll have seen that there were fans who have travelled over to Norway to support our girls, and a shout out to them because the support that they give the club is absolutely fantastic. So the fans went out to Norway to support them, and we've seen last season the fans turn up in their numbers when the games are played at Celtic Park, and we do see them turning up in their numbers at Airdrie as well. But like we've touched on, Lawrence, it isn't ideal. But Liam, like Kevin comes in to say on YouTube, Fran is doing great work. Fun to watch him and the squad, and that's very true. I think if you do watch Celtic women play, you do see a very good, fun style of football. They do play quick passing. They are a good team to watch.
It's Fran Alonso is a very special manager because not only has he got the team playing fantastic football, but he's done it consistently over a number of years when, for want of a better phrase, his team basically gets strip mined every close season. You know, it really is frustrating that the Celtic women's team are having so much success, but they're doing it, I think, in spite of the direction that the club are financing it rather than because of the way they're financing it. You know, you and I have had this conversation numerous times. All it would take is a couple of million quid to turn that team into something really special. And it's really frustrating that, especially when we know how cash rich we are, that we can't just ring fence a couple of million quid just to get the ladies up there as the best in Scotland. Because that's all it would take.
You're right. And there's a couple of comments coming in on the channel asking about the finances. And it doesn't take much. And the comment there asking why we're not spending as much as other clubs in Scotland. And the answer to that is I simply don't know. We are capable of doing so. We all know how much money Celtic have got in the bank. We don't have the biggest budget in the league. We don't have the second biggest budget in the league, or even the third biggest budget in the women's league. So to have them go over and compete as well as they did in the Champions League is absolutely all credit to them. And I look forward to seeing what they can do domestically this season. And hopefully success continues to breed success, Lawrence. And we need the club to back the women's team. We all know the momentum that women's football is going in. It's growing. It's one of the fastest growing sports in Europe is women's football. And there's so much potential there that we need to make sure that the club tap into by ensuring that the Celtic women's team are the best team in the country. We strive to ensure that our men's team are the best team in the country. I want to see us do the same for the women's team.
I totally, it's a bit fun to see the likes of Chloe Warrington doing well for Glasgow City. Trinity High School pupil come up through the academy with Celtic ladies and we lose her to City. It's not good. Losing Tash Flint and Liv Ferguson, it wouldn't have cost the earth to keep them. They're definitely top level performers for the team. So yeah, Celtic need to figure out a way. I think getting more games at Celtic Park, if they go ahead with the mini stadium at Barrowfield, holding the rest of the home games there would go a long way to generating more money. I mean, it's not huge for a season ticket. I think it's £80 season ticket to see the women, but it's out in the air. It doesn't feel right, does it? But yeah, they need to have a look and think, if we invest this, even $1 million, I think would probably put us top of the pile in Scotland. A bit of ambition there, and and you could have us both going out and flying the flag in Europe. Well, I just want to touch actually something you were saying about the Celtic story about many more chances, in the Europa League. Probably this season will be our last because I can't see Rangers winning the league for a long time. I think it's going to be us. So this season's probably our last for Europa League because it's going to be Champions League, ad infinitum more or less, isn't it? That's going to take some kind of miracle for them to jump the chasm and catch us. Especially, Brendan's here for 3 years. I think we'll just more or less win the league every year. They'll be further behind. But yeah, the board should back the women's team more. We've got loads of money in the bank just now. It's not like they've spent it on a left back and a keeper, is it? So do something constructive with it just now.
I think when you put it into context, Liam, this current Scottish record transfer fee for a women's player is £35,000. We are not talking massive sums of money needed here to ensure that the quality is coming into the club.
I mean, even at the top level, Japan's top scorer at the recent World Cup, Miyazawa, she signed for Man United last week, and I believe the fee was 150,000. So a lot of money for the women's game, but not a lot of money for Celtic if we diverted the appropriate resources. Celtic as an entity could definitely afford that. And, we've got form for bringing players out of the Japanese market and doing quite well with them. So why can't we transfer that down to the women's team?
Why can't we? I think it would certainly be a good philosophy going forward. And we'll see. The next women's game is at Excelsior. The next women's game's at the Orion as we take on Hearts through in Edinburgh on Wednesday night. So we'd encourage anyone who can to get along and support them there. Lawrence, you're going to tell me before we finish up today about some other Celtic events that are coming up that the listeners might like to know about.
Yes, Clara Paradise Promotions has an event on Thursday. Still tickets left to see Stilian Petrov and Arthur Boric, two boys that perform miraculously in Europe at times, So call Clare at Paradise Promotions if you want to come along and hear about their stories about Celtic. I'm sure Arthur will have some crazy stories to tell us.
Yeah, no, it should be a good night. It's always great, Liam, I think, getting to listen to ex-players. I host some of these ex-players nights as well. And I think what we find nowadays is that we get a lot more access as a result of social media. A lot of the things that come out now might not have come out in the past, some of the stories, some of the communications. So getting to go back and hear some of the ex-players from years gone by tell their stories, give a little bit more insight into them as individuals, them as a team behind the scenes. These are great nights to get to hear these sort of things, Liam.
Yeah, and I would say enjoy these nights while they're around, because such is the money flying around football these days that I think this might be one of the last generations of professional footballers, definitely at Celtic's level anyway, that will do these kind of nights on a regular basis, because we're getting to a point now where players, once they retire from football, they basically do not need to work anymore. So, yeah. And especially, Stelian Petrov, he's had a tremendous career as a footballer, but he's also had great personal battles off the pitch as well with his illness that he came through. And he's a guy who, whenever you see him on the TV, he always speaks so positively about Celtic. Always a fantastic spokesman for the club. And yeah, any event that he's at, I'd be happy to go along to. Again, if I could afford the taxi fare.
Just a little bit far away from you, we'll let you off. But no, if you are interested in any of these nights, do keep an eye on our socials and find out when the next one is. Celtic State of Mind have one coming up very soon with Chris Sutton at Don Max. Again, Chris Sutton, an excellent storyteller, and I'm sure that's to be a very good night. Another night coming up at Don Max is with Simon, Jackie and Charlie Mulgrew, who's recently announced his retirement. That's on Monday the 25th, if anyone's interested in that one. So plenty of nights to go along and hear about these ex-Celts and hear their stories that I'm sure people will enjoy. In terms of today, though, unfortunately, our time is up. Next Tuesday, I'm leaving you guys again. Paul John will be back in the hot seat hosting the Tuesday, because I will be over in Rotterdam as Celtic take on Feyenoord, but I will certainly be posting and sending my updates from there. But for now, thank you for everyone who joined in the comments, and thank you to Liam and Lawrence for joining me today on the Celtic State of Mind.